Hey, this is Zachlog the Great, and I am here tonight with Nate
Hey,
and with our friend Travis,
Hello.
and we are getting together tonight to talk about Edmund Vance Cooke's poem "How Did You Die?" Um, and of course, as usual, I will be reading the poem in just a moment. But as usual, I will mention if you like my work, if you like what I do, please stop by subscribestar.com, and you can sign up to support me for as little as $1 a month, and I would appreciate that. Having said that, let me get the poem up on the screen, and we will and I will go ahead and read it for us. Where are we? Here we go. Uh, Let me know when that shows up for you guys.
good.
Okay.
Got
How Did You Die? By Edmund Vance Cooke. Did you tackle that trouble that came your way with a resolute heart and cheerful? Or hide your face from the light of day with a craven soul and fearful? Oh, a trouble's a ton. Or a trouble's an ounce. Or a trouble is what you make it. And it isn't the fact that you're hurt that counts, but only how did you take it? Are you beaten to earth? Well, what's that? Come up with a smiling face. It's nothing against you to fall down flat, but to lie there, that's disgrace. The harder you're thrown, why, the higher you bounce. Be proud of your blackened eye. It isn't the fact that you're licked that counts. It's how did you fight and why. And though you be done to the death, what then? If you battled the best you could, if you played your part in the world of men, why, the critic will call it good. Death comes with a crawl, or comes with a pounce, and whether he's slow or spry, it isn't the fact that you're dead that counts, but only how did you die? So, since I was just the reader there, would one of you care to lead off?
Sure.
I'll let
There's
Nate
been
start.
there's been a lot of cultures that talk about manhood and sort of brought a lot of it into how did you die? Did you survive to old age and then die in your bed? Then well you're not going to make it to the famed halls of your ancestors because clearly you didn't try your strength properly. Because the only way to know the limit of your strength is to have it fail. And usually that kills you. And if you were truly a great and strong man and did everything you could, you would have eventually found something stronger than you to kill you. Or, you know, said the whole idea of, are you beaten? Okay, that's fine. Get up. Have you had hard times? Cool. Push through. There are a lot of, it says those are valuable traits and things that you need. And a lot of cultures around the world, at one time or another, have vaunted them, some too much. But in the end, when you're facing the situation that might cost you your only singular one life on this earth, then you need things like that to go ahead and, put some steel in your spine and keep you from doing, living with a craven soul and coward, as the poet said. So honestly, I think this is a good poem for anyone coming to manhood to read and to understand the truth of. I think we're losing that quickly today.
Yeah, this actually this reminds me a lot of I think a comment I made when we were reading when we were talking about a poem by H.P. Lovecraft, one he did regarding Robert E. Lee, and I said, and there's that it ends with, what kindlier spirit breathing from on high can teach us how to live and how to die. And like the poem says, whether death is slow or spry, like we can be pretty sure this is going to happen to all of us. There's a lot of things we worry about that might happen. This one will happen. There's not really an if. And so we know death is coming for us, and yet today a lot of people, it seems like today a lot of people are afraid of death itself, and you can't avoid that. It's going to come. It is going to happen to you. But what you can do something about, and what you have some say in, is how you die. On what terms it happens to you. And you can die, honorably, or you can die cravenly. You can die fearfully, or you can die with courage. And so, that's obviously applied. That obviously there's death itself, but even before that, he talks about lesser pain, lesser suffering. And all of us are going to have some degree of that too. You're going to have, things go wrong. You're going to have pain. You're going to have things you're afraid of. You're going to have things you just don't want to deal with. And so the question is, again, how do you face this? Are you going to sit there and complain? Are you going to, ponder why me? Or are you going to get up and, face the next day and make the best of each day? So,
well, this poem really extends sort of the punch of an old saying that I like, which is, "The coward dies 1,000 deaths, the brave man only one."
Yeah, Travis.
Well, I'm pondering that statement right now. I haven't heard that before.
You haven't heard that one before?
I don't think so. But yeah, it seems like there's some truth in that. But that ties into something Nate said about, I forget exactly how he was talking about it, but in some ways it was easy to be a courageous man back in the day because you stood in a line opposing another line of men, and you all had swords and clubs, and you just went at it. At the end of the day, either you lived or you died. The challenges of life today, like the battles that we fight, are a lot more complex and nuanced, and you're not likely to die. So continuing to slog through is a different sort of experience. Not that they didn't slog through; they probably slogged through for a month before they finally got to their battle site. But a friend was saying this, and I can't remember exactly how he said it, but there aren't many clear-cut battles left in our modern society, or clean deaths in a sense.
Well, and the other thing you were saying about is not just that it's this sudden crisis. It's this one thing you've got to get through. It's also the fact that you're there with a couple of hundred other men on your side, and you have unity of purpose. That man next to you is there. He's got your back and you've got his, and it doesn't matter what you're facing. It doesn't matter what kind of problems you're dealing with. Having that is having that kind of sense is a pretty, it can give you a lot of strength. And that's also probably something that, a lot of men, don't have as much these days. Our society is kind of fragmented. There's not a lot of opportunities for men to develop the kind of, frankly, I think a lot of elements of our society positively discourage men from developing those kind of, friendships, those kind of relationships that can, help them, that can give them strength through those problems. So, uh,
Well, the thing is that while all those things help you, to be courageous, to be, strong, behave in a manner befitting a man, they're also not necessary. I mean, a man who is brave will be brave, by himself. A man who is a coward can be made brave by the judgment of his friends, and the fear of that being greater than the fear of death, which is often enough what happens in, situations like that. But I mean, and so, like I said, you don't need others to be strong. It just makes it easier. And honestly, the hardest battlefield you're ever going to be in, is the one in your mind. As years ago, was watching the Regular show, and they're like, "Hey, let's do something scary." They're like, "Yeah, let's go out to the old haunted house," or "No, let's hang out at the abandoned mine." And there's this older guy that was part of the cast, and he said, "Why don't we go to bed early and be alone with our thoughts?" And everybody was like, "Whoa, calm down, man." And so
put down your phone for 5 minutes and think about your life without any interruptions. Do you have the courage?
Well, Lewis tells us that's one of the ways that you find God is to, remove the distractions, or rather, the way that you can allow God to find you. But yeah, and so, in some ways, the whole building connections, with people and finding common cause and unity that's a good thing. But you got to develop that personal fortitude as well. And I find that the things that help you to do that are the things that we don't get taught anymore. Discipline, duty, honor, all those things, like, kind of the old cardinal virtues, right? And also, right. You also have to not take yourself so bloody seriously. I was desperately ratcheting back the intensity of adjectives right there to get to one I thought was, you can't take yourself so seriously, because if you take yourself seriously, then any problem is, and you're just centered on you. Any problem that you have is huge, right? Any problem that's coming at you is the biggest deal. But when you get past that, you grow up a little, then you realize that the things I'm going through they're no fun, certainly, but it's not the end of the world. It's not even really a ripple in the ocean of humanity. It's just something that, it's bumping one little piece of spray around, and I'll be okay. See, one of my favorite statistics to show how far things have come is that in the modern era, in a civilized country, if you can get prompt medical attention, like within the first 10 minutes or so, any gunshot wound that does not kill you outright, you have like 95% chance of surviving on average. That's unreal. And that goes to show that even really, really bad things, really, really difficult and devastating things, are very survivable. And so, being a little short on money, not getting to do the thing you do, somebody breaking up with you, losing your job, not getting the job you wanted, all of those things, not that bad. You'll make it. You will live.
Well, and the other, the other thing, like it says in the middle stanza, the harder you're thrown, why the higher you bounce. Be proud of your blackened eye. And I've heard variations on this from, several people. But if you're afraid to fail, if failure scares you, and you're not willing to take a big risk, you're never going to succeed in any meaningful way. In order to succeed, in order to accomplish something that matters, you have to be willing to take risks with real failure as a possible result. In fact, let me see if I can find that. That actually reminds me of something from a book by Terry Pratchett. I want to see if I can find that quote.
Well, while you search for that, allow me to regale everyone with the story of a man who was very much a man and who has nothing to be ashamed of when the tale of his death is retold. His name was Rick Rescorla, and he's come up in 2 books that I've been reading recently. The first were We Were Soldiers Once and Young by Hal Moore. It's the story of the Battle of the Iadrang, and if you have not read it, read it.
I saw the movie. I haven't read the book.
Read the book.
What was it again?
We Were Soldiers Once and Young. Mel Gibson's We Were Soldiers was a pretty decent retelling of the first half, but there's a whole other part to that battle. But yeah, very, very good book, and has a lot of very interesting stuff in it.
So am I correct? Am I correct in guessing this is a war story?
Absolutely.
And which war would that be?
Nam.
Okay.
But Rescorla is actually an Englishman. He immigrated to the United States, joined the army, and he was a lieutenant at the time of Iadrang. And by all accounts, he behaved very gallantly, very bravely, and he led his men very ably. And he fought some other battles in Vietnam, was a monstrous badass. The dude was a fantastic soldier. He came home after the war many years later, ended up working as the head of security for Morgan Stanley. And he popped up again in a book that I've been reading to my sons. It's about different various heroes, fictional characters, knights, soldiers, all that. Firefighters, cops, superheroes, mythical heroes. Just honestly, I find it to be a pretty decent book to be reading kids. Teach them the things that we don't get taught anymore. But it talked about Rick Rescorla. He was at the headquarters of Morgan Stanley in the South Tower of the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. He brought out 2,850 something people, led them down the tower, out the stairs, got them to safety, and was last seen on the 10th floor going up. So his whole life, he was a hero, and in death, he was a hero. And honestly, if, like I said, if the Norse had it right, we know they didn't. But still, it's fun to think about that if there's any face in Valhalla, it's his. Because that man lived and died a hero. And that's the kind of thing that we need to be able to look up for. Oh, did we mention he had cancer at the time? Like bad cancer. So he never let the hit keep him down. And he kept doing what needed to be done. Right up until the moment that he was buried under hundreds of tons of steel and concrete.
So the quote I was talking about, in my head this connects. Perhaps I'll have to. You guys can tell me whether you see the connection or if I have to explain it. But it's from a Terry Pratchett book, Going Postal. Have you familiar with that one then?
Yeah, I read that one.
Okay. I believe in freedom. Not many people do, although they will, of course, protest otherwise. And no practical definition of freedom would be complete without the freedom to take the consequences. Indeed, it is the freedom upon which all the others are based. Sorry, go ahead.
That was Veterinari speaking, wasn't it?
Yes. And you know, you can't have a real meaningful chance of success if there isn't a real meaningful chance of failure. You know, success, if you're playing a game and you literally can't lose, then winning doesn't mean anything.
An example of that from my life, a moment that I deeply regret, was I had an acting class in college, and they give us these scenarios, and the guy came up with a scenario where whoever he invited up on the stage, which was me, would be like handcuffed and in a torture room. And instead of actually going with that, I went with the fact that I didn't feel any threat at all. So I played that route instead of actually delving into a character in that position, like how would they actually behave. I don't know if that's a good example or how well that ties in, but it was like there was no chance of failure for me. I wasn't actually going to be tortured. Like there was no threat of actual torture for me. So I was just kind of laughing in the guy's face.
So you're saying we should torture actors? That's what I'm hearing.
No, that's not really the point.
Especially the ones who wind up in Hollywood.
Oh, trust me. I feel like those people are much more tortured than we could ever, put upon them.
Quite a few of them, yes. But the freedom to take the consequences. But
what gets me is something that struck me the other day as I was listening to Sabaton. And it goes back to a quote that we've had come up a few times is, they may have had false gods, but they had real men. And I think about, the sort of, quote, last of the samurai, the holdouts against the modernization of the empire. They said, hey, the country's going to lose its soul. So they fought to the death against overwhelming odds simply to make the point that there are things in our tradition worth preserving. And so, we had 500, blade-wielding masters of war on one side versus 30,000 conscript soldiers with rifles. Now, that battle's only ever going to go one way, and everybody knew it. But they fought their best, and they made their point. And, I don't know, maybe for the best, maybe for the worst, they did manage, to make it stick. Some of the things that they stood for were carried forward because the value was shown. I guess that's the difference you make, when you pick your hill to die on, and you make your stand, is that, taking that risk is the only way your death makes a difference.
This actually,
and I guess, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
I mean, that kind of brings up, like, this poem isn't really about death. It's about life. It's about how are you going to live. I mean, death is a mere instant, actually, in your whole experience of life. It's just that instant when you take your last breath. The whole question is how are you going to live, up to that death. I was going to go somewhere else from there, but I don't remember what it was, so I'll let Sean take over.
I was just going to say, when I was rereading this, to rewind a little bit, give a little context, I actually recorded this poem, posted this to YouTube 2 years ago, which I was surprised it's been that long. And It's actually of the poems I've recorded. It's actually one of the more watched ones from that far back, which is part of the reason I wanted to. Sorry.
I think it's because the title sounds kind of emo.
But yeah, that's part of the reason I wanted to have this talk. But as I was rereading it to to get it back in my head for this, it actually reminded me of something from a movie I saw also probably a couple of years ago now, when it was in actually longer ago than this, when it was in theaters. Have either of you seen Hardcore Henry?
No.
No.
Okay. I won't say it's a great movie. Okay, I'm not gonna say like it's a masterpiece of cinema or anything. It is interesting in a few ways. Like technically how they filmed it and how it looks. It is, although it's not from a video game, it may be one of the most faithful video game adaptation kind of movies I've ever seen, because it actually kind of looks like things would look to someone who was one of the people who was in the middle of a video game. But what the reason I brought it up now, one thing I really liked about it was there's a moment near the end. You have this main character, and he's been betrayed, or actually, she was never really on his side. He's been betrayed by this woman he thought he was fighting for. He's found out that basically he's been used. He's been being exploited pretty cruelly for a while now. And there's this kind of flashback, and I found it really cool because this is what motivates him to get back up and keep going, and it's a memory of his dad. And it doesn't seem like this is the kind of thing you see in movies a lot these days. It's unapologetically masculine, I think would be a good word for it. And and in the flashback, this group of other kids, it's when he was like 8, 10, 12, something like that. This group of other kids had just beat him up, taken something of his that he really liked and smashed it. And his dad comes and finds him, and tells him, I love you. You're my son. I'm never going to talk abusively to you, but you have a question in front of you right now. Are you gonna lie there and swallow that blood in your mouth? Are you gonna get up and go spill some of theirs? And like I said, just the fact that it's his father, this memory from his father, that inspires him to get back into the fight and show these people who have been deceiving and exploiting him, they made a big mistake. I really like that, and this poem kind of reminds me of that. It's unapologetically masculine, I think would be a good word, would be a good phrase for it. And you don't, particularly in things written today, you don't see that a lot. You don't see a lot of poetry that could be described that way, which is awful, because I mean, the earliest poetry we have is the stories of men going to war, and in these great conflicts. Poetry is not in its nature effeminate or weak. There's a lot part of the reason I did this series, there's a lot that has been neglected. It can do a lot more. So I don't know if I connected all that very well, but
there's another, we talked a lot about like, the fighting and dying aspect of it. How did you die and how did you live? But there's a different sort of, take on it that I've been thinking about. And that is, just the the ability to just grind it out, to keep doing what needs to be done, even without glory, even without victory, in the usual sense. And I think, and this has been the heritage of men forever, and now sadly the heritage of some women. But it's the idea of the provider. Just, he may have never swung a sword, but he's probably swung a hoe once or twice. Turned a wrench, drove a truck, swung a hammer. Just done some kind of just thankless job for 100, like just tens of thousands of hours to make sure that everybody had what they needed. And a really good song about it that kind of brings this out is by a band called Uncle Lucius. I cannot, by the way, vouch for any of the rest of their music, but this song hits me. Probably because it, starts off, it describes a place a lot like where I'm from. But, talks about, he was born in a place where chemical plants put food on the table of the working man. And that working man does his best to provide safety and shelter for kids and his wife, losing a little of his soul every day, working overtime to keep the wolves away. The song is called Keep the Wolves Away. And that is a noble thing in and of itself. Just to, just to get into the yoke and just plow, baby. Just to make sure that, said that you and yours have got what you need. Whether it breaks your heart, breaks your spirit, or breaks your body, you keep on going. And, my dad, he was one of those guys. He's in there every day. Just day in, day out, 52 weeks a year, making it happen. Didn't feel good, didn't matter. Injured? Nah. I'll work it off. Just making sure that, my mom and me and my brothers and sisters had a warm place and warm food. And so, if you never have to fight a fight, physical battle, if you never have to, go up against life or death, that doesn't mean that you haven't lived a good life. And if you shouldered the responsibility, and if you did what had to be done when it needed to be done, whether that's, again, battle or breadwinning, my hat's off to you. You've done the thing that you're supposed to do. And it said ladies are not distinct from this. There are some that have to, they have to head out there just like the men. That's a damn shame. It was absolutely a shame and a pity, but, props to them for doing it. So to all those that bear the burden of provision, this is for you too. And you got nothing, you don't have to stand ashamed before any warrior or any hero. Because the world is built on the backs of you guys and gals, and let's throw you.
One more look here.
So I didn't actually like the line. There's something about the line. where's it at? The harder you're thrown, by the higher you bounce. Something a bit trite about that. I mean, maybe it's true. I mean, technically, it's somewhat true, but that depends on the surface that you're landing on. A lot of times, it may just absorb you even harder, and break a few more of your bones. But there were other aspects that, in some ways, it almost felt like this guy was one of Job's friends, you know, talking to Job, like, get it together, stop your complaining, be a man, you die properly, you know. There's a sense of that in there, I feel like. In some ways, like, I don't get the sense that this guy's actually suffered at all. And yet he's throwing out all of this advice about, you know, dealing with suffering. I'm not saying he didn't. I have no idea. But there was one
Canadian.
take I took on. What's that?
Well, he's Canadian, so that's enough suffering right there.
Could be. So that was just kind of an alternative look at it, something that I was feeling in regards to it. I think part of it's just this sort of can-do response that's given to the suffering.
It's also a question of like what matches the situation. Like, you know, you brought up Job and, like, you know, and his suffering, and, you know, people. I think a lot of Christians don't you know, pay enough attention to, like, the whole arc of that book, because, you know, Job spends most of it saying, you know, God, you know, what's going on? Why did you do this to me? You know, how do I deserve this? And when God, you know, finally shows up, for one thing, he does say, and all his friends are like, look, Job, like, this was somehow, this must be your fault, you know, and, you know, God treats the righteous kindly, and, like, all, and you know, you need to repent and set yourself right. And, you know, at the end of the book, you know, God finally shows up, and now he does say to Job, like, okay, let's keep things straight. I'm God here. I'm God. You are man. You know your place, please. But he also says, you know, you other guys here, Job was the one who was talking righteously about me. This guy who's didn't curse God, didn't you know, his wife said, you know, curse God and die. You know, he never abandoned God, but he said, like, he wanted answers, and God said he was the one who spoke rightly of me. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong, and I don't think Edmund Vance. I don't think Cooke would, you know, disagree on that. I will say, and actually, I had said this before to Nate. I like this poem. At the same time, I think it is kind of one-dimensional. It's not bad, but there's not. It feels like it's missing. It feels like it's missing something that would push it to being a really great poem. But it's good. It's a good thing to hear. It's a good thing to keep in mind too.
What was that, Nate?
It's kind of an Aesop. It's just, here's your very simple lesson. It's a very simple thing. Right. It's not trying to say, it's just making its one point and one point only. All right. It's supposed to be, you know, sort of a shiv in your consciousness rather than, you know, a sword to decapitate. It just goes right there in the back of your head and is like, hey, this is important. Yeah. said, and yeah, is it that simple? No, it glosses over the difficulty of doing any of the things that it talks about, of getting back up and not lying there. Those all take a lot of effort and will and pain. It's looking at it, it's looking at all the events almost like, kind of like a jolly old man looking back at an eventful life. Because most of the time, the scrapes and the difficulties and the hard times, you look back on them with enough distance and you're kind of like, haha, yeah, and so you forget how tough it was to endure in the moment. Like it or even if you don't forget it, it loses the sting and you only remember the victory. And so that, and I said, and that's what you end up with in this poem. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's harder. Obviously this is all a little too sweet. But that's the point. It's not trying to show the grim and difficult parts of valor. It's trying to show that this is what you need to do. And it's a good thing. And so, yeah, oversimplified, sure. But I think that's part of the purpose.
Yeah. And when I was thinking about its, fluffiness or oversimplification, in contrast, I thought of The Charge of the Light Brigade, because it carries a lot of the same actual thematic material, but has a much more profound resonance afterwards. Like this, you kind of read it, you kind of think about it, and I'll probably forget it. But The Charge of the Light Brigade, you're actually watching these guys go into battle, and you're experiencing this, the awfulness of death and losing and dragging yourself back out. And there's some significance in that.
Well, that's what Sean was talking about. This isn't great poetry.
Right.
It's not an epic classic. Because you're right. It doesn't have sort of the pathos. You're not getting any of that. But again, I would still hold that's not the point. This guy wanted, sort of like a virtuous limerick, and he wrote it down.
Yeah, I think, I don't mean to take away from it. It was just, that's kind of.
So, I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to say. Nate, did you have any last thoughts on this one?
The best version of The Charge of the Light Brigade is The Trooper by Iron Maiden.
And Travis, any last thoughts from you? I will have to look at the Charge of the Light Brigade and see if I want to do that one in the future. Let me see. It's not too long. It's certainly doable. But Travis, any last thoughts for you?
I don't have any last thoughts, except that the line about the blackened eye comes out, and I'm glad I don't have a blackened eye right now.
Okay. Well, in that case, thank you guys for joining me tonight, and hope to talk to you soon. God be with you.
Also with you.